Welcome to True Reddit Reads, where real stories are told by those who have endured too much and stayed silent for far too long. Today, I'm going to tell you a story that I believe will make you angry, will shock you, and then will leave you feeling so deeply satisfied you won't be able to stop watching until the very end. Have you ever loved someone so much that you abandoned your own sense of reason? Put your heart and your career in their hands, only to realize that love was a trap all along. This is a story of a journey from blind devotion to brutal clarity, from betrayed trust to the moment I finally chose to rise, not just for revenge, but to reclaim myself. Chapter 1. My boyfriend turned into someone else. I used to think I was the luckiest person in the world. You know, the kind of love everyone dreams of. We met in a quiet coffee shop, our eyes met over old pages of used books, and everything felt like a romantic movie. He was handsome, gentle, thoughtful, and always made me feel like I was the only person in his world. In the beginning, everything was perfect. We spent long evenings together cooking, watching movies, planning our future. He used to say he'd never met anyone who made him feel as peaceful as I did. I believed that, and I loved him. But then things started to change. Not suddenly. It was the kind of slow, creeping change, like living in a house where every day someone quietly moves one small thing, a pillow, a cup, a painting, until one day you realize this is no longer the home you once knew. The first time I felt uneasy was when he asked who I was texting. I thought it was sweet a sign he cared, a little jealous maybe, but it didn't stop there. He wanted my phone password, he wanted to check my messages. Then he started getting upset when I went out with friends. I still remember the time I went for coffee with my best friend. He sent me nearly 30 messages in an hour. Where are you? Who's sitting next to you? Why haven't you replied yet? I felt scared, but also guilty, like I was the one doing something wrong. I began shrinking myself, seeing my friends less, not going anywhere unless he came along, always reporting back on every little thing I did, and he always had a reason. He'd been cheated on before, he just wanted to protect me, he loved me too much. I heard those lines so many times that I started to believe maybe I really should be better so he wouldn't have to worry so much. But if love makes you feel like you need to apologize for being yourself, then that's not love. Chapter 2. The First Signs of Psychological Abuse. I used to think if I just stayed quiet, if I was patient enough, if I was good enough, things would go back to the way they were. But the truth is, the more I gave in, the more he tried to control me, and the more he changed into someone frightening. One night I simply said I was tired and wanted to go to bed early. And yet he stood at the doorway, eerily silent, just staring at me without blinking. When I asked what was wrong, he replied, "It's just strange. You never go to bed early without a reason. Did someone tire you out?" I laughed, thinking he was joking. But he didn't laugh. He sat down and began interrogating me like I'd just betrayed him. Who did I text today? Where did I go? Did I talk to that coworker from the other day? I had no idea what was going on. And when I tried to explain, he just sat there quietly and then softly said, "I just need to know you're being honest." That line sounded gentle, but it felt like a rope tightening around my neck. From that night on, I became afraid of silence, afraid of soft questions, because I knew what came after the suspicious glares, the slow burning anger, the cold, wordless days. I stopped smiling as much. I stopped listening to music, stopped reading, stopped painting the things that once made me feel like myself. I didn't dare do anything that might make him misunderstand. I even deleted some old friends from my contact list just to make him feel secure. The worst part, I didn't realize it was emotional abuse, because he never yelled, never hit me, never raised his voice. Everything came wrapped in soft phrases. I just want what's best for you. I only do this because I love you. If you have nothing to hide, why are you upset? He didn't punch me, but he broke me down piece by piece, and I let it happen. Until one day I realized I was living in an invisible cage. And the one holding the key was the very person I once believed was the love of my life. Chapter 3. A locked cage doesn't need a key. There's something strange about toxic relationships. You never see the line until you've already crossed it. I started getting startled by the smallest things. The phone ringing, a message notification, even the sound of his footsteps in the hallway. Every time I heard those sounds, my heart clenched. Not because I was afraid he'd get angry, but because I didn't know who he'd be that day. Would he be the thoughtful lover making breakfast and hugging me from behind, or the cold interrogator staring through me as if I were a liar? One time I came back from the grocery store, 15 minutes late. He didn't say much, didn't yell, just looked at me and said gently, "I was worried. I thought something happened to you." I apologized, over and over. Explained that there was traffic, a minor accident ahead, but his eyes never left me. "Why didn't you text me?" he asked, and I didn't know what to say. My phone had died. That night, he installed a location tracking app on my phone. "Just so I can have peace of mind," he said. "Don't you think it's useful?" At first, I thought, well, I have nothing to hide. Maybe it's fine. But within a few weeks, I started to feel like I had no space of my own anymore. I stepped outside for 3 minutes and he texted, "Where are you going?" I stopped for a coffee and he video called me to see your face. "I miss you. I visited my mom," and he called 4 times to ask when I'd be back. I began lying. Not because I was doing anything wrong, but because I needed a moment, a breath, a pocket of air where I wasn't being watched. I told him I was busy when really I was just sitting alone in my car engine off in a parking lot. Silent. Just to be myself for 15 minutes. That's when I realized love isn't supposed to feel like this. It's not about needing permission just to live. It's not about fear when the phone rings. It's not about freezing up when you see a message that says, "Where are you?" But when you're in it, you convince yourself that if you just try a little harder, love a little more, compromise a little further, maybe they'll go back to who they were at the beginning. Except he never left. He was just slowly revealing who he really was, and I kept pretending not to see. And that's the scariest part. When you know something is wrong, but you're too drained to walk away. Chapter 4. The answer in her eyes. I knew I had to talk to Mom. But this time it wasn't going to be just a casual question followed by a vague, dismissive answer. I needed the truth. The whole truth. I waited until she was sitting alone on the porch holding a cup of tea, her gaze distant. She looked tired, like she was holding something and barely keeping it from exploding. I walked over and sat down beside her. "Mom, I need to ask you something. This time, please don't avoid it." "Okay." She didn't look at me. She just gently set her cup down on the table. "It's about that photo, isn't it?" I froze. "You knew I always knew the day would come when you'd ask." I swallowed hard. "Then? Who is he? The man in the photo, is he my father?" Silence. The breeze rustled the leaves gently. My mother stared out at the yard, then slowly nodded. "Yes, that's your biological father." I felt something inside me shatter. It was relief and shock at the same time. Then, the man I called Dad, all throughout my childhood. A kind man, my mother said, her voice choking. A man who agreed to raise you as his own even though he knew you didn't share his blood. I didn't understand. Why did you have to hide this from me? She turned to face me. And for the first time in years, I saw her drop the mask. No more toughness. No more protective shell. Because I was afraid. Afraid that if you knew who your real father was, you'd hate me. You'd leave me just like he did. I went quiet. "I loved him so much," she continued, "but he didn't love me the way I thought. When I got pregnant with you, he vanished. No goodbye, no responsibility. He left only that photo and a mess inside my heart." I choked up. "Mom, I would never hate you for that. But I needed to know. I needed to know where I came from. And you didn't give me that chance." She buried her face in her hands. For the first time in my life, my mother cried in front of me. "Forgive me," she whispered. "I chose the wrong way to protect you. I didn't know what to say." Part of me was still angry, but another part just ached for her. I gently placed my hand on her shoulder. "I want to know who he is. I want to know the other half of me. I'm not mad at you, but I need the truth." She nodded, her eyes still full of tears. "I'll tell you everything. No more hiding, starting today." Chapter 5, When the Truth Turns. I don't remember who was the first to call me that night. Maybe it was Grandma, maybe it was a curious neighbor, but when I got to the hospital, there was only one thing I knew. My mother was unconscious, and outside the emergency room stood my sister, the one I hadn't spoken to in nearly 2 years. It was strange. Seeing her, I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't remember the texts, the harsh words, or the sense of betrayal. I just saw her crying, trembling, and looking at me like a child, reaching for the only family left. The doctor said my mom had collapsed due to low blood pressure, exhaustion from insomnia, chronic stress, and deep depression. They used the phrase post-divorce psychological crisis. I was stunned. I hadn't known, no one had, that she had been seeing a therapist, that she'd been on medication, that she cried when no one was watching. My sister, in a rare moment of vulnerability, grabbed my hand and whispered, "I'm sorry." Just those 3 words. But I heard everything she didn't say. I was wrong. I regret it. I need you, and I needed a reason to forgive. We sat together by Mom's bedside. I told stories from when we were kids, like how Mom used to carry both of us on her back, walking a full kilometer just to buy a tiny birthday cake. My sister laughed through her tears. Mom stayed silent, tears rolling down her cheeks. But I knew she heard us. From that day, we started over. Not to build a perfect relationship, but a real one. No more lies. No more calls just to blame each other. No more cold silence. I learned to accept that people make mistakes. And sometimes love isn't about always being right, but about knowing how to apologize and knowing how to listen, even when it's already too late. One day, as I was washing dishes at Mom's house, she walked up, gently placed a hand on my shoulder, and whispered, "Thank you for coming back." I didn't reply. I just took her hand and gave it a soft squeeze, because I needed to come back too. Not for her, but for myself. Chapter 6, The Forgotten Letter. A week after my mother was discharged from the hospital, I returned to the old house to pack up a few things. My sister had already moved out, and Mom no longer had the strength to live alone, so we decided to sell the house. I didn't expect to feel emotional until I opened the last cabinet in Mom's study. Among stacks of old papers, expired medication, and crumpled divorce documents, I found a small envelope yellowed with time. No recipient name, no postmark, just a handwritten line. "If you ever come back." I sank down onto the floor and opened the letter. My eyes scanned the messy but heartfelt handwriting. "My daughter, I don't know if you'll ever return to this house. I'm not even sure I'll get to see you again after everything that's happened, but if one day you do come back, if you read these words, please hear me just this once. I was wrong. I didn't know how to love you the way you needed to be loved. I was too stubborn, too sure I was right, and too scared to admit I had hurt you. I used to hope your sister would reconnect with you on my behalf, but I didn't expect that in her pain, she too would be pulled into the storm I created. I drove the two of you apart, and then I blamed time for the distance. If you can forgive me, please come back. You don't have to hug me. You don't even have to call me Mom if you don't want to. Just knowing you're still out there living and happy, that would mean I still have a chance to make things right." I must have read that letter at least 10 times, and each time I found a new layer of meaning. But what moved me most was the final line. "P.S. I still keep the bracelet from your 16th birthday. It's never left the drawer beside my bed." I used to believe my mother didn't care, that she deliberately ignored what I loved, what I needed, and what I felt. But the truth was, she just didn't know how to show it. That night, I took the letter home and gave it to my sister to read. She was quiet for a long time, then finally said, maybe. She was also a victim of a time that didn't allow women to be weak. That line stayed with me for days. We decided not to sell the house, not to live in, but to keep as a place of memory. Every year, we come back and plant a few new flowers with Mom. No one says much, but in that silence, I know the cracks are slowly beginning to heal. Chapter 7. From Victim to Villain. I wish it had ended there, that the truth had come out and my child and I could start over. But no, just when I thought I could finally breathe, another nightmare crashed down on me. One morning I received a summons. I was being countersued. My mother-in-law filed a lawsuit against me for elder abuse and child abduction. It sounded ridiculous, but they had evidence. Old photos of me arguing with her, audio clips edited and out of context, and worst of all, a furious online community outraged by a completely different version of the story, one told by her. On social media, my mother-in-law became an elderly victim, abandoned by her ungrateful daughter-in-law. She called me a heartless traitor, a mentally unstable woman, obsessed with controlling her child. They painted me as a monster, locking my son in dark rooms, beating him, abusing his poor grandmother. I crumbled. Even some tabloid sites ran headlines calling me things like cruel mother, young wife, who used an old man for money, then kicked his family out, a calculated gold digger. I didn't know where to begin defending myself. I had a lawyer, I had evidence, but what I didn't have was public sympathy. Because of the severity of the accusations, the police had no choice but to reopen the investigation. They came to my house. They questioned my child. And then, it was my child's voice, trembling quiet, that saved me. I don't want to go back to Grandma. She scares me. She locked me up. She said I was a ghost. Just those few simple sentences. But they made the investigator fall silent, and they made me cry, not out of fear, but because my little boy finally spoke up. After that, my lawyer suggested filing a countersuit, not just to clear my name, but to end this battle once and for all. But I hesitated. Did I want to see my mother-in-law go to jail? Maybe. But what I truly wanted was peace. I had already lost too much. All I wanted now was a simple life, one where my child could grow up without being afraid of his own grandmother. But life isn't that simple. She kept going, filed an appeal, posted more fabricated stories, hired a new lawyer, rallied extended family, creating a full-blown family front to drag me deeper into public hatred. And I was left with only one choice: stand up, face it. Chapter 8. The Silence. That meant everything. I don't have nightmares of shouting anymore, no more waking up in the middle of the night, my shirt drenched in sweat, no more waiting for anonymous messages or glimpses of a shadow behind the curtain. I moved to a different place, a small, quiet town where no one knows what happened to me. And that's the best part. No one looks at me with pity. No one asks, "Are you okay?" with that undertone, the kind that carries doubt, like I must have once been weak. I cut off all contact with him. No emails, no calls, no social media. I used to think if I did that, he'd become dangerous. But surprisingly, nothing. Not a single reaction, as if I never existed. It took me months to accept that this wasn't a failure. I didn't need a grand final showdown to feel like I'd won. Sometimes winning is just being able to go to the grocery store without looking over your shoulder. It's being able to sleep through the night without jolting awake to check the locks. I still keep the security cameras, but I don't stare at them every night anymore. I've learned to walk a little slower, to look straight ahead, and sometimes I smile at strangers. I also started therapy. At first, I went just because people said I should, but it turns out being allowed to say everything without judgment, without interruption, without being dismissed, is a kind of freedom I never knew I needed. I used to think in order to overcome someone like him, I had to become stronger. But the truth is, I just had to return to myself. The woman who used to laugh out loud, who used to trust people, who used to dream. He doesn't control me anymore, not because I ran away, but because I'm not afraid. There was one night I sat in my tiny apartment, dim lights, a cup of tea beside me. I played that old song. I used to love the one he said it was too sentimental. And I cried, but not from sadness, from relief. A kind of lightness I didn't know how to put into words, because for the first time in a very, very long time, I felt peace. No one knocking on the door, no one spying, no one telling me how I should feel, just me and the silence. And that silence was the most beautiful thing I had ever owned. And that was my story. A journey not just to walk away from a betrayer, but to rediscover the person I had lost during all those years of lies myself. I loved someone who didn't deserve it. I sacrificed, I forgave, I held on until I realized the only person truly worthy of my love was me. If you're in a relationship that makes you question your own worth, hear me. You don't need proof to walk away. You just need one reason, and that reason is that you deserve more. Thank you for listening to this story. If it made you think, moved you, or gave you strength, please share, hit like, and subscribe to True Reddit Reads so you don't miss the next True Reddit story. Because sometimes the truth doesn't exist to break you, but to remind you you still matter, and you are not alone.